For too long, we've kind of bought into this illusion that we're in a neutral world, that the world is okay, you Christians do your thing over there, we'll do our thing here, but like the education systems is this neutral place that we send our kids to that doesn't have any sort of agenda. And I think we're starting to see that that's not the case, that there very much is an agenda, and it's oftentimes directly opposed to what we're trying to teach at home as Christian parents.
Now let's talk about gender theory. What is that?
So gender theory can also be known as queer theory. It's really an attack on the normal. It's this idea that the gender binary of a male and a female is somehow oppressive.
And just real quick, binary meaning two.
Two,
right?
yes.
Binary, two different genders.
Two different genders.
Okay.
As God made them male and female. So what we receive from Scripture, they would say that's an oppressive idea, that we are, and gender theory and queer theory is really addressing children, because that's where we develop our identity. We feel comfortable in our body. We learn what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl.
Right.
And so gender theory is very focused on teaching kids to reject that binary.
Which just sounds so outrageous to those of us who understand Scripture, who understand the reality of the way that God made us. We talked about the identity issues with critical race theory being broken into these categories of the oppressed and the oppressor, the victims and the perpetrators of the cruelty. What about gender theory? What are the identity categories there?
That's the thing, because it's against the norm of a man and woman, of male and female. They're essentially creating out of whole cloth a wide variety. I think Facebook has like 47 different gender options that you can identify as. So, you could be an asexual, you could be a gender fluid, all of these different identities that you can. They call it performative gender. So you can put on these identities as a way of kind of thumbing your nose at traditional oppressive categories of male and female.
On a practical level, what are some of the effects that gender theory is having on children in the classroom?
Yeah, and this is where it's really heartbreaking. This is becoming an epidemic in America, and I think people are starting to wake up to that, of kids that are being encouraged to identify and to step into these gender identities. We have adults that are trying to lead them down this path that is leading a lot of kids to transgender identity. And that comes with a whole variety of different procedures that are done to drastically change the body. It's irreversible many times. So they'll put them on puberty blockers if they haven't gone through puberty yet. That just keeps them in an extended childhood until they can determine, which gender do I want to be. We're seeing kids, as young as 13, 14 getting top surgeries where their breasts are removed. It's very horrific stuff. And so there's a very real cost to this ideology being promoted in schools.
And why do you think parents are allowing this to happen?
I think that for too long, we've bought this, the idea that the teachers are the experts, that the school administrators, they're the experts. I'm just the parent. I can't, I don't need, I can't really speak into this because I don't have a degree in gender studies or whatever. And so we end up kind of delegating that responsibility to the experts in the classroom, and we believe that what they're telling us. Like, many parents will be told, like, if you don't affirm, your daughter's new identity, then your daughter's going to commit suicide. Like, that's just flat out, what's going to happen. And so these parents, are horrified by this, obviously, and so many of them will, come alongside and affirm this out of this fear that if I don't embrace this new identity, that there's going to be great harm to their child.
It sounds to me like we as parents need to get our identity back. And we need to understand who we are in the lives of our children.
Yeah.
That God has placed us as parents in positions of benevolent authority to guide our children toward wisdom so that they can know God, they can see God, they can understand who they are, so that they don't get duped by these wolves in sheep's clothing who want to eat them for lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for too long, we've kind of bought into this illusion that we're in a neutral world, that the world is, okay, you Christians do your thing over there, we'll do our thing here, but like the education systems is this neutral place that we send our kids to that doesn't have any sort of agenda. And I think we're starting to see that that's not the case, that there very much is an agenda, and it's oftentimes directly opposed to what we're trying to teach at home as Christian parents.
And what I know is freaking a lot of parents out, and we're seeing parents rise up about this and saying, hey, these are my children. I'm going to decide what my kids are going to learn in this school. And we're seeing politicians say more and more like, no, you're not the experts. You're not going to decide what kids are going to learn. And so it really comes down to this battle of worldviews. Who is in charge of our children? And when schools try to keep things secret or separate from parents, and encourage children to do things, and they don't let the parents have any say in the matter, that is just outrageous to me. How did the schools ever get this idea that they had such authority to marginalize parents?
Yeah, I think it gets back to what I talk about in the thread, just this idea of needing to sever that bond between parents and children because they believe that the parents at home are an obstacle to what they're trying to teach at school. And so if they can get these kids to step into a new identity and then we hide that from the parents, like I saw one school, or I think it's a trend in multiple schools, are establishing transition closets so that you can leave home as a little boy, show up at school, change clothes into little girl's clothes, and so while you're at school, you're a girl. And then before you go home, they change you back so that your parents never know the identity that you have at school.
To protect you and your true identity. I mean, Clark Kent went into the phone booth and he came out as Superman, but this is taking it to a whole nother level.
What this does to kids is it teaches them to keep secrets from your parents. It teaches them that the trusted adults in your life are at school, and that at home they are trying to oppress you. They're not loving. They're not, they don't accept you as you are like we do here at school. And so what this does is it really kind of creates a rift between the parents and the children that takes those kids and kind of brings them over to the side of the social justice activists, which is what the end goal is.
And so effectively, we as parents, if we're dropping our kids off at a public school that's teaching critical theory, gender theory, essentially we are handing the parenting over to the government to train up our children in the way they say they should go. And ultimately, that responsibility falls with us when we stand before God.
Yeah.
You also say that some educators, teachers, are actually being weaponized in the scenario and maybe unknowingly being part of the problem when they think they're just trying to be understanding.
Yeah.
How is that the case?
So I want to make this clear. I think most people, when they hear this, they think, not my teachers, not my school. We've got Christian teachers, the principal's a Christian.
Yeah, we've got good teachers.
We've got great teachers that love the students. What is happening is that love for the students is being manipulated by people who have this agenda to promote this ideology in schools, and they're sold this caring program of like, we need to care for these kids. It has nice sounding names like social emotional learning. So that would, be used to teach kids about, other kids who come from different lifestyles that, feel different about their gender and sexuality. And so these ideas are kind of, these teachers are feeling like they need to do this, especially once, a kid shows up in their classroom that identifies differently, they feel this need, this urge to kind of protect them, make sure they don't feel awkward or don't feel like they're not normal. And through this process, they begin to teach the other kids, and then it becomes kind of a flywheel that builds on their empathy.